Okay, welcome back, everyone. I've got a couple of things I want to talk about today. Obviously, the eclipse is going to be one of them, and then I also want to address a bit of a name change that I'm going to do here. I'm going to switch the name of this channel to Inside Out Astrology. I feel it's a little more descriptive of what I'm doing here and how I think about things. I see it obviously as an inner psychological story, and that's what we're going to call it from now on. So now that we've got that out of the way, um, let's kind of move towards this eclipse. We're going to have a full moon lunar eclipse in Pisces, and I think that is going to illuminate some things and then change how our consciousness experiences it. It's going to set the stage for the next 6 months, this eclipse cycle. But I think you can also look at it in like the 2 week phase of, in between a new moon and a full moon. You can look at this as the 30-day cycle as the starting from the new moon, which happened to be a solar eclipse in Leo, and then this full moon, which is a lunar eclipse in Pisces, because it was a late degree Leo, it's moving into Pisces, and then that next new moon, which will be in Virgo. But it won't be an eclipse. So, but then you can also look at it in a 6 month cycle, the full moon uh, being born of this Leo new moon, and then the Leo full moon coming in 6 months. You can look at it into a year cycle of, the next Leo new moon, full moon cycle as well. So there's a lot of cycles, and that's how astrology works. I picture this sandstone cliff that is shaped by the wind. It's this rock that's solid, that's there, or shaped by water coming over it. It erodes it slowly over time, and it's the movement of the cycles of that, or the wind, the wind erodes different shapes out of it. It's a it's a it's a beautiful picture. What all the hard corners and stuff like that get worn smooth through these cycles, and I really love that that picture. So I'm going to share my screen here, and we can look uh, at the chart. So first of all, you've got the sun and the moon here, and they're opposed each other. And because they're close to the nodes, that's how we get the eclipse. There's a lot more we could talk about that, and I could explain why. It's about the 23-degree shift of the Earth's at the tilt of the Earth compared to the orbit around the sun, which creates the seasons and all of that. But for this purpose, I want to just focus on the let's get this pen going here. The fact that this sun and the moon are in between right here after the nodes. The nodes are moving this way. The moon and the sun are moving against that. Forgive my rudimentary arrows, but because of that, this is a new phase. And so I think that's significant, especially when you think that we're coming off of the heels of this new moon solar eclipse that happened in Leo. It was a completing phase, but we're also beginning something new. And so I like to look at it like this. We're doing both directions at once. We're letting go of some patterns. The sun is shining the light, and the moon is reflecting the light of a new phase to the south node. And so I also want to talk about the lead up to this, and how Mercury and the sun have recently passed that south node. I think that's important too, because we're starting something new here. And but in the lead up, we kind of had this Jupiter Mercury conjunction that happened, that's in a balsamic phase to this south node, and Jupiter, I think, goes across it sometime in October or November. I can't remember the exact date. But we had some deep insights coming from this Jupiter Mercury conjunction. That's the right brain, left brain coming together. Jupiter makes everything big, so it's really going to expand. Jupiter, being the right brain, is more intuitive uh, thoughts. And I think the moon is kind of a repeating signature of that. This moon here, being something that is a more liminal kind of thought, especially a moon in Pisces. And this one is conjunct Hecate, the asteroid Hecate. Hecate is the goddess of thresholds, and she it came to Persephone and held a torch to kind of help her guide back and forth and light the way for her to see what the next steps were in that mythology. And she's been associated with thresholds even beyond that Persephone myth, but I really like that part of it. And what I see here is we're kind of not able to see this full picture. And I'll explain more about why I think that as we get into Venus's role and Mercury's role and how these are going to play out over the next couple of months. Because remember, this is like a freeze frame that is going to set the stage that we're going to move through the next 6 months, kind of, and this will be in the background. I mean, I don't know. A lot of people, like, I'm really feeling this liminal space in between the eclipses, and it has really brought up some deep emotions for me, especially, as the moon went through Scorpio, where Mercury is going to retrograde. Let's talk about briefly this Mercury. Mercury had a complete retrograde cycle here in Pisces, and then it moved on, and it just recently had its full retrograde cycle in Cancer. So that's a water sign. This is a water sign, and then Mercury will do its final water retrograde here, fully in Scorpio. And so we're finishing up. Mercury is bringing something about our deep emotions that come up. Mercury makes its travel between the underworld and the conscious world and brings things forward that we need to process through the emotional body. And I think that it can happen both on a subconscious level and a conscious level. And I think that this conjunction that just happened with Jupiter and Mercury in a balsamic phase to the south node was kind of part of that. We probably got some flashes of insight that weren't totally clear, but I think that, it's starting to, we're coming through this phase. We're going into a new phase. I'm going to stop the pen here, and I'm going to animate this chart so that we can uh, look at how it moves forward. So in order to show this, I'm going to back up and show just before. This is right after Mercury did its retrograde. Jupiter and Mercury almost made a conjunction at like 26 degrees of Cancer here, my words. And now it's headed towards its superior conjunction with the sun. there are two types of Mercury conjunction with the sun. One is in between Earth and the sun. That's the inferior conjunction when it's retrograde, which it just went through. And then the other one is when it's on the other side of the sun. So the sun is in between the Earth and Mercury. And I like to call that one the light of understanding. And so, but I think it's fascinating to watch as this progresses because the sun goes new phase with the south node. Then a couple days later, Mercury goes new phase with the south node. And then we go a couple days later and we're right at the eclipse, right as Mercury goes through that superior conjunction with the sun. Now it still is in the rays of the sun, so it's still a little cloudy. But I think things are starting to come and make sense. We're starting to really put together some of this stuff. But in between, we're still getting these both signals, this way and that way at the same time. And there may be still some doubt and confusion about what's going on. And I think this inconjunct between, let me get my pen going here again, and this inconjunct between Neptune and this Mercury sun as it's eclipsing the moon that's going to set the stage for the next 6 months is part of that confusion. We need to do what they call an internal adjustment here. And what is this internal adjustment about? It's about getting sorting out and differentiating the details of what we're doing here. And remember, we're off of the heels of this new moon solar eclipse in Leo. So how are we actualizing in our lives what this Mercury Neptune conjunction that started back in February as it brought it forward? So Saturn is, did I say that right? This Neptune Saturn conjunction back in February. Saturn is now retrograde and it's backtracking over some of its territory and it's going to get right back into this conjunction. I still kind of consider them conjunct because it's been since February, but they move so slowly. It got out to 14. Saturn got to 14 degrees and it's starting to head back. It's a slow burn. There is a trine with Jupiter here in Leo. Jupiter in Leo is really making this a very big thing about this heart check about how we are moving forward and how we are uh, actualizing, what we're trying to do here. And the way that I've been looking at this from this inner psychological level is this inside out view of the Neptune coming balsamic and conjuncting into or Saturn becoming balsamic and conjuncting into Neptune in Pisces and then conjunct right at the very beginning of the zodiac at the 0 degrees Aries. We dissolved a bunch of the old structures that we had built up. And what I mean by that is the rules that were cast in our inner collective, the inner parts of our psychology. We tend to build up these protective parts that are protecting emotional vulnerabilities that we didn't have the ability to integrate when we were younger. And those protection strategies can become outdated. And I think that as a collective, these are collective transits, right? As a collective, we're talking about how a lot of that stuff got washed away. And so when I was in Peru, I was touring Machu Picchu and I'm looking at these big terraces all the way up this super steep mountain. And they built these so that they could drain water, so that the water could wash down. And they brought in sand and then rocks and then all of these different materials, and then they were growing things on the terraces, and they were also put out there so they could use them and they would be stable and it wouldn't erode away. And so it was all designed to allow the water to wash through it. And I think it's such a cool metaphor for what's going on here because you've got Saturn kind of balsamic conjunction. It culminated into Neptune in Pisces, and all of that water washed away the structure that was built out of protection, out of this fear mode, and out of this stuff that we no longer can bring forward with us as we're moving into this new era of our lives. Like I think that this is all moving towards something new that isn't quite clear yet. We have been in this new phase with Neptune and Saturn here, and new phases are messy. Like it's you throw a bunch of stuff against the wall, you see what sticks, and then as you move into that crescent phase, you start to kind of narrow it down. And I think that we're going to be doing some of that. And that's what I think part of this both directions is about. We're reviewing what's not allowing us to take our own authority right now. Saturn, we're trying to make sense of what we've thrown against the wall, and we're sorting out the things that are sticking and the things that aren't. And part of that differentiation process is, learned guilt versus earned guilt. Am I good enough to do this? And there's a lot of doubt that can come up in this. And then this Jupiter trine here is a beautiful thing. Jupiter in Leo, it can make this really big. And and I think that we really need to focus on what is the bigger planet. The slower moving planet informs the faster moving planet. Bigger wasn't actually the right word because Jupiter is obviously bigger, but you get my meaning. Saturn is the slower moving planet, and Jupiter has moved all the way around here to this conjunction. It takes a year for Jupiter to get through a sign. But so Saturn is informing Jupiter and saying, we need to organize things. We need to put some structure around things. We need to commit and move through daily processes and really refine and figure out what we're trying to get accomplished here. And I think as we go through this water process of the Mercury cycle, it's really kind of bringing in some doubts. It's dredging up all of these underworld, these emotions that were buried when we were younger. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm really starting to churn through some of this, and it's bringing it up, making it conscious, and it's allowing me to see what was there and form a relationship with it. Because as I've talked about in previous videos, the goal is not to get rid of that stuff. We've tried that. That's why it's buried. It doesn't work that way. We need to bring it up to consciousness and make friends with it because it's coming with us. It's our past. It's part of us. It's part of who we are. And I think that that's a wonderful thing. But the way that we see something, if we can turn it to another direction and see it from another way, Hillman always said, don't totally interpret what something means because as soon as you interpret it, it kills the image. And some of these images that are frozen in time from when we were younger, we've created these narratives around. And that brings me to this Uranus. I think Uranus and Mercury are a big key to this. And so Uranus is in a T square with uh, the sun and the moon during this eclipse. And that's going to set that frame. Uranus is also doing something else here. It's got the base square here but it's also got two sesquiquadrates that point at the apex of Venus. And I think Venus is also super important because, once again, how we relate to this, how we relate to these narratives that we've brought up. Um, you've got this trine between Uranus and Pluto, and Pluto is in Aquarius. Pluto, Aquarius, it can, I like to think of as our inner collective. It's also spiral in, spiral out. It's also how we interact in the main collective with other people in general. But on this inner psychological level, it's how we interact with our inner community. These parts of ourselves that have been protecting, that have been uh, exiled and afraid, these frozen parts of our memory. Um, Jupiter or Uranus just made a new phase conjunction to Sedna. Sedna is about these frozen parts of ourselves. It's this Arctic goddess that was betrayed. And when you look at that from the inner psychological level, what parts of ourselves have we exiled and betrayed and turned our backs on, and how can we bring those forward? How can we change the narrative around this? Uranus is in Gemini, and there's two sides to this story. So I really think that that's why Mercury dredging up these old memories, that's a repeated theme of the new phase to Sedna and Uranus. It's bringing those frozen parts of ourselves, thawing those out, bringing them forward so that we can really see it. So using our masculine side, we can go into the feminine side, which has been turned its back on, and and look at these things. And how we do that is important, because I talked about this neutral chi, or this neutral way of approaching things. And you can be aggressive about doing it, which is, how do I get rid of these parts? Or you can be afraid of them and bury them and exile them, and then the protection strategies start. And we're in this liminal space in between, where things are doing both things. We've got parts of ourselves that I like to refer to as, it's like ghost pains. When somebody loses a limb, they can still feel this pain. And it's like this psychological thing that, they're feeling pain in their hand or their wrist, but their wrist is actually gone. There's no actual physical reason for them to feel it. I think that there are structures that have been dissolved in our psyche, and the only thing that's left is the stuff that could withstand the water. And it's back to that Machu Picchu flow. Those have been there for 600 years, and they've withstood the water because they were very carefully constructed. And, Saturn has to do with our bones and our structure, and, the, the the container that we have, and the being right there with Neptune, like it went through and it washed away everything that wasn't real. Neptune can be this illusion, and what's left after the illusion is gone. And so now I'm going to turn this off, and I want to forward this through just to show what this Venus is doing, because this is what they call a hammer pattern. Let me go back to this really quick. This is a hammer pattern, and those hammer patterns, I mean, in reality, look, the moon square to Uranus is only going to last for a moment. But as I said, this eclipse sets a freeze frame for the next 6 months. And I think that this really does set the stage. And so these sesquiquadrates, these are evolutionary gates. And that makes me want to come down here, and I want to show you, this is the phase wheel. And these are the different phases. But everywhere there's a fixed sign, this is where let's go back to this. This is where Aries is. This is where Taurus is. This is where Gemini is. This is where Cancer is. This is where Leo is. So, right smack dab in the middle of Leo, we go from the first quarter to the gibbous phase. So, you've got right in between that first quarter, the gibbous phase, but in the very dead center of Leo. And I think it's, we've got a new moon solar eclipse in Leo. We're dealing with a lot of Leo archetypes here. Um, and I think that it's very hard to let go of this inflated kind of top of the pyramid mindset to go to the bottom of the pyramid, which is kind of what this gibbous phase talks about, and it's humility. It's from humiliation to humility is the way that my teachers taught this to me. And it's a very hard thing to give up that because humiliation is a very big motivator. You can be motivated by fear not to do it. And both these sesquiquadrates are right there at that phase. So I'm going to flip back to this because if you look here, Venus to the moon was conjunct Venus and moved around here. So it's not the waning side, it's the waxing side. And Uranus is the slower moving, so it's informing Venus and it's moved around here. So it again is the waning side. If it wasn't, it'd be over here. So phasal phasal 101, there's a lot more to it than that. But I really think so. The moon squaring Uranus once again. How can we surrender to this to the grace and the truth of what our deeper emotions are, and how can we get these flashes of insight around what these narratives have been and what they possibly can be? And how can we do this from that neutral position? This is the Mars in Cancer. We haven't talked a lot about that, but it's squaring Saturn here. It's squaring Saturn, but it's also trying the moon at this point. The freeze frame moves forward throughout this cycle. So back to Venus. Venus has the scales of justice as its symbol for, it's relational. It's a relational archetype, and it's how we relate to people, how we're receptive, and it has in Taurus. It's a dual rulership. So in Taurus, it's that inner relationship to ourselves, its self-worth and value and our value systems and things like that. And in Libra, it's about listening. It's about listening to the other side, and can I allow the other side to exist without trying to change them? Or, on the shadow side, do I change out of fear to keep the peace? And so, how do we relate to that fear? How do we balance that out? It's such a beautiful archetype. I have a ton of Libra in my chart, and um, it's a lifelong journey to figure it out. Oh, it tugs at my heartstrings, and that's what I think this heart check is all about. Well, now let's go back and let's forward this through, and you'll see because Venus is getting ready to go retrograde. It moves up to, I think, 8 degrees Scorpio and then retrogrades. And meantime, Mercury moves up here and passes Venus and starts its retrograde cycle, the finishing of the water trine retrograde cycle that I've been calling it. And so, and when they go retrograde, they both turn direct and station and turn direct on the same day. Let's see if I can move this forward. We'll go weeks, move it forward here. We're almost there. Then I'm going to switch to days and we'll go So here goes Venus turned retrograde right here, and then Mercury passes it and soon goes retrograde. Stations, it's retrograde. So they're both going to go back, but they both station direct on the same day, right there, November 12th. And so, I mean, if you look here, Jupiter has crossed and gone new phase with the south node. Mercury or Mars is going to do the same thing. We're really into that, and this is the next 6 months. Actually, it's a little less than that. We've got to go into February and stuff, but I just wanted to give you a sense of that because this is going to be a scorpionic, deep themed Mercury retrograde. This has been a Leo with a little bump of Scorpio into it. It stationed retrograde in Scorpio. So it gives that deep transformative thing. And look at that. The sun is going to be squaring the nodes right at the same time in Scorpio. It's going to be a fascinating time. We're going to have to come back and really deep dive and take that back. Um, so I want to go back and see if there's anything I missed. Let's see, July 30. I think that puts us right there. This is the eclipse chart again. So um, we can't really look at the houses because this is just for general purposes. If you guys want to look at this in comparison to your own chart, we can certainly do that. I'll put a link in the description and you can book a reading. My books are open. We can talk about how this affects your chart and see if maybe there are places within here where you've got placements that it's directly interacting with. My Jupiter happens to be at 5 degrees Virgo. So I really see a lot of that theme coming through for me. Um, on any event, I think that we've covered it. Uh, oh, there's one other thing that I really want to talk about that I think is a facilitation here is you've got Chiron here. It's recently turned retrograde. And I think that the narrative is that we are revisiting the wounds, and by doing that and using this Uranus to liberate from the old narratives and then allow this new narrative to be, and then relating to this in a new way and learning how to relate to this in this neutral way so that we can lead from a place of wisdom. I mean, that's what this Saturn is about, is leading from wisdom and having the daily interaction and being able to organize what we want to accomplish here in a way. And look, it takes some surrender. We just came out of this nodal axis going through Virgo and Pisces. And it's kind of learning the balance between what you can control and what you can't control, what you need to surrender to. And I have found through this work leaning in. There was a time when I really leaned in hard, and you can make a lot of progress, but it seems to really start to move when you can surrender to the process and trust that it's working exactly the way it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be that way. But we've got a trine between Chiron and the sun and a sextile between the moon and Chiron. And so both those are harmonious aspects. Harmonious aspects can also play out in a way that we kind of hide in them a little bit. We can fall back on some of the old stories, some of the old methods, some of the old ways we've done it. But then this Mars in Cancer is, it's kind of asking us to uh, be present and to be there with it. And we've got to be careful with that because Mars in Cancer can get a little aggressive. Like it can come at things sideways. You can have this sarcastic response. It's kind of like Scorpio in the fact that it'll come around sideways and sting you. Um, and I think that people can become reactive here. Once again, that's where I really want to focus on that neutral chi, um, being able to stay present and assert yourself without being aggressive or without letting other people walk over you and being too afraid because of your emotions, too afraid or frozen and unable to act. So Mars is also trining this south node and the moon. So this is great stuff. There's a lot of great opportunity here, but I really like, so the cautions part that I would say is this hammer pattern that comes up here and does the Venus part, and that this aggression could get away from us. We could really get trapped when you feel like the victim and you want to strike out because of that. That's when you really want to set yourself back. Look, I'm not saying anger is a bad thing. Anger is a great emotion. It tells us where our boundaries have been crossed. It tells us where we need to slow down and really allow ourselves to look at what's going on and learn to see what's under it. But if we don't express it and we hold it back and we keep it to ourselves and don't give it a voice, then it can build up. My uh, Somebody that I really respect told me your parts go into a corner and build a volcano if you just repress this. And Jeffrey Wolf Green talked about this too. If we repress the natural law of things, and that's why, Capricorn comes after that, we can build up rage. There can be rage underneath it. And especially if we deny our anger, I have a Mars in Capricorn, and so we can, if we deny our anger, that stuff can build up, and we could really turn that aggression gets turned inwards, and that's what I don't want to see you guys do. So when anger comes up, it's information, it's informative. What is it telling us? Can you sit with that in a neutral way long enough to be present and curious? This Uranus is really asking us to be curious about the stories that are coming up. What is the old story that is just, it just can't live on anymore? This is a disseminating square between the moon and Uranus. What are these old stories that we just can't be anymore? Like, I know I'm not this. I don't know what I am, but I know I'm not this. And so that's where, once again, I feel like we have this both directions going on at the same time. I need to let go of these old stories, but I don't have enough information about what I am yet. This is such a new phase here, and these new phases are messy, and it's by trial and error the way things go. So um, I'm gonna get out of this. I think that it's a beautiful time. I really like it. It's when it if it gets hard for us and there are things that come forward and it starts hammering us, lean into that ability to listen to both sides, to listen to these stories that are coming up, to try and understand where they're coming from and why. And uh, you also need to be careful about getting too aggressive with it, with, because you can have very good intent and really put these parts on the spot to try and figure out how to heal it, how to shift it, how to change them. But if you're in a relationship with somebody and all they want to do is change you, what are you going to do? Your natural inclination is to dig your heels in and not trust them. And so it really needs to be something that you trust and that comes, with you. And so, okay. Um, let's do all the things, like, share, subscribe, chat. Let's talk about this. If you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer. If you'd like to look at your chart in comparison to the transits, to what's going on, just to get a sense of what your inner psychology could look like, where the work is, how we can move forward without uh, losing ourselves, or anyway, lots of things. I'll put a link in the description, schedule a reading, and we can go from there. So at that, I will leave it at that. And thanks, you guys, and we'll see you next time.